This is the first lecture for Geology 100 Natural Disasters, and my name is Dr. Scott Nowicki. Today's topic is human history and how the geologic and climatic environment over the course of human history has actually affected where humans have been and what we have seen in the past. The big question that we're going to be facing in this class is what kind of disasters and events are we likely to see in the future? So the best way to get a good idea of what could potentially occur in the future is to look at the past and say, what have humans seen over time? Have we seen large-scale climatic variations? Have we seen mega eruptions? Have we seen catastrophic events? And the more we can glean from the past, the better idea we can have in terms of what's going to happen in the future. So the questions that we're going to face are, first of all, of course, when did humans first appear? So we could get some sort of time scale for what humans have seen. Where did they first appear? Once they appeared on this planet, where did they go? And for those early humans, what was civilization like? Civilization and climate and the local environment. There are all these things that could have affected humans at the time. So the big question is, of course, did humans ever experience large-scale climatic change, mega eruptions, meteor impacts, these big things that we kind of consider to be catastrophic events? Really what we're trying to get at is our experience unique of this nice, stable climate? Are we worried about things that really don't have a very high likelihood of happening, or have humans seen big events in the past? A lot of the information that I'm going to talk about in terms of human history comes from the Genographic Project. This is a National Geographic effort to map human migration over pretty much the course of human life. So there's a lot of information if you want to go to the National Geographic page. I'm going to show you some figures that don't look like what the page looks like now, but they do a little bit better job for the kind of topics that we're talking about. So to start with, where do humans fit into the large-scale scheme of bipedal hominids on the surface of the Earth? Here is a chart of the early human phylogeny running from 6.5 million years ago until today. So on the left-hand side, we've got the oldest age on this chart, and on the right-hand side, that's the present. So if we look at where all of these different lines are, they effectively show the timelines of these different species over this 6 million year period. So to start with, here's Homo sapiens. There we are. We are the only bar in here that of course makes it to the present. If we go down a little bit, we can see that there's the Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalis, that ended sometime before the present. There are no Neanderthals alive today, effectively. So there was some period of time during which they survived. We take a step back, and there's Homo heidelbergensis. We can see that all of these blue bars are this Homo genus. So we belong to this family of very, let's say, human-like animals. Now, of course, we didn't start fresh as this form of life, so what we can do is go back in time and see that there are some older effectively links that allow all of these different species to occur. So if we go back before the Homo genus, we can see that there's this Australopithecus, and Australopithecus afarensis and Australopithecus africanus run from about 4 million years to about 2 million years. Those are kind of considered to be where humans branched from. Now we go further and further back, and there's a little bit less information, but we still have a pretty good continuous line of information going from kind of basic primates to where we are currently. But you can see that it took millions of years for us to get to that state. So here is a famous, what we would consider to be one of these links in this phylogeny. This is probably the most famous of all the types. This, of course, is Lucy. And Lucy was an Australopithecus that was around somewhere between 4 to 2 million years ago. Lucy was around for a very short period of time, of course, but this species, or these couple of different species, this genus of humans, if we call it, were around for a decent period of time. So we know that humans didn't necessarily look like what we consider humans today. So where you draw the line between human and other primates is a matter of debate. But for the most part, we can say that we know that there was this direct lineage from 5 million years ago, pretty much until today, through a couple of different genus and a couple of different specific species. So this Australopithecus, around from about 5 million to maybe 1.5 million years ago, was probably the species that gave rise to the Homo habilis, so going from the Australopithecus to the Homo genus. Now this was important because this is effectively the first hominid source of actual sites and camps. And if you can see where these all occurred, they are all occurring in Africa, and they occur for the most part in East Africa. So this is the East African Rift. It is effectively the cradle of humanity, so that there are a number of spots within here where these sites were found, where these very advanced human-looking primates were doing their thing. As you get closer and closer till today, there are significant changes that occur within these forms, and the one that you may have heard about is Neanderthal or Homo neanderthalis, very closely related to humans, most likely could reproduce with humans. At this point, this is when a lot of these humans got out of East Africa and made their way into good chunks of the rest of the world. So Neanderthals are considered to be very similar to humans. It turns out that a lot of humans have Neanderthal DNA within them. This is the first real expansion that goes out into Europe and establishes some major sites. This occurred about 200,000 all the way to 30,000 years ago when the Neanderthals died out. Now, of course, we go to Homo sapiens and fairly recognizable forms. These are, of course, the humans that we consider today, but the reality is there was this line of different humans as we go back millions of years. So Homo sapiens, of course, the modern humans that were found at sites as long as 195,000 years ago. So this Homo site in the East African Rift shows that humans started in that East African Rift zone just like Neanderthals, and they spread out from that point. So this is really the cradle of humanity between 500,000 and 75,000 years ago. This is where humans really started to appear and kind of branch out around the planet. So the East African Rift is actually defined as kind of this geologic terrain. It is a rift zone where Africa is starting to pull apart. There is the Somali subplate that is to the east, and then there's the rest of the African plate that is to the west. And over time, this zone has been pulled apart along this drift zone. So it is a relatively low topography area, but it's dotted with volcanoes and lots of other interesting geologic characteristics. But it's really important because this is an anthropological site, but it also coincides with this geologic site. So these are the different sites within here. A lot of different sources of sites of early humans were found throughout this East African Rift. It is simply suggesting that there was evolution occurred within here to produce these different hominids, and then they spread out once they survived within this East African Rift. Alright, so between 500,000 years ago and 75,000 years ago, we know that there was a lot of expansion that occurred around the planet. Humans made it out throughout the rest of Africa, they made it into Europe, and they made it into Asia for the most part. Now when we look for really sources of information, Australopithecus all remained within Africa, whereas the Neanderthals made their way up into Europe, and Homo erectus made its way throughout the Middle East into East Asia. And so there are a number of different, obviously none of these guys exist anymore, but it shows that humans did make their way out in these various forms over kind of long periods of time. But then many of them got wiped out. So that's our first source of information. We have different species that made their way out of Africa, but we, of course, are the only ones that have survived till today. So it tells us something about early conditions on Earth during this period of human evolution. Alright, so from 60,000 to 50,000 years ago, this is the end of the Neanderthals getting into human expansion, or Homo sapiens expansion around the world. This is where we started to see humans actually make their way out as a function of the climate. So what was going on at the time is that these glaciers were expanding and retreating over large portions of the Earth, and effectively these glaciers were pushing humans around, or at least allowing humans to move to different locations. So from 50,000 years ago till 12,000 years ago, these glaciers were in a period of contraction, so they were melting, temperatures were increasing, and that's really what allowed humans to go from that previous form from down here within kind of the mid-latitude ranges to spread out pretty much all over the globe. So by 12,000 years ago, there were humans on most continents, pretty well distributed around the Earth. Now, one interesting condition that occurred, of course, is that at the time the sea levels were lower because more water was still locked up in these glaciers. So this is when humans actually made their way across this land bridge between Asia and North America and was able to settle in North America and work their way all the way down to South America. So this land bridge is a pretty important part of the human story, because just like a number of different spots in the world, geology was able to control where humans could get around. When sea level was lower, there was a significant land bridge, of course, then there were glaciers that got in the way. So it's pretty interesting to see when there was a land bridge coincides with when expansion actually occurred, but there's a whole nother aspect of this story that during the time that even though sea level was lower, there were these glaciers that covered over much of the area. So one of the stories is that humans made their way across the land bridge, but then got stuck by all these glaciers in North America and had to wait for those glaciers to actually melt. So it's not a single human or even a family of humans making their way around the planet. It really is thousands of years of migration that allowed humans to expand all over the planet. So that last glacial maximum that occurred 25,000 years ago, that is when the glaciers were at their furthest extent. This is the Wisconsin episode of the Pleistocene Ice Age. Most of Canada was under ice. A good chunk of North America, in terms of the northern United States, was under ice, and the climate was slightly cooler. And then over that few thousand years, and so this chart shows, and the numbers are how many thousands of years ago, that's where the edge of the glaciers were. So starting at about 18,000 years ago, the glaciers made their way all the way down to southern Illinois. At about 14,000 years ago, made their way to whatever, the Great Lakes. 12, 10, 9,000 years ago, the glaciers were significantly smaller and just covering a portion of Canada. By the time we get down to 6,000 years ago, pretty much the glaciers have melted over North America.